The massive coalition fleet arrived in formation. Over 2,000 ships spread across space in a display of power that should have terrified any enemy. Fleet Admiral Thyssara stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching as the USS Titan appeared on the main screen. Even surrounded by the largest armada in galactic history, the human supercarrier looked dangerous and defiant. "All ships, this is Fleet Admiral Thyssara," she broadcast to her entire fleet. "We are here to destroy a single human vessel and end this rebellion before it spreads further. Remember, humans are clever, but they cannot stand against our superior numbers." But even as she spoke the words, Thyssara felt doubt gnawing at her. Confidence, the human ship was not trying to run or hide. Instead, it was moving slowly toward the center of the coalition formation, as if it wanted to be surrounded. Captain Ben Carter stood on the bridge of the USS Titan, calm and focused despite facing impossible odds. Around him, his crew worked, at their stations with the quiet efficiency that had made human crews legendary during the war. No one showed fear, because they all knew this moment had been inevitable since they first returned to find their people enslaved. "Captain," reported Commander Amy Foster, "we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Hayes. She's sending us complete tactical information about the coalition fleet, including weapons capabilities and command structure." Ben nodded grimly. Lisa, Hayes had finally chosen her side, and her information would make all the difference in what was about to happen. "Amy, are the quantum displacement cannons ready?" Ben asked. "All 3 cannons are charged and targeted," Amy replied. "We've never tested them in combat, but the computer simulations suggest they should work exactly as designed. And our fighter squadrons. All 240 fighters are ready for launch on your command, sir." Ben looked at the tactical display showing thousands of enemy ships surrounding his vessel. In a normal battle, the USS Titan would be destroyed within minutes, but this was not going to be a normal battle. "Open a channel to the coalition fleet," Ben ordered. Thyssara's face appeared on the main screen, her mandibles clicking with nervous energy. "Captain Carter, you are surrounded and outnumbered. Surrender now and your crew will be treated according to galactic law." Ben smiled coldly. "Fleet Admiral, I have a different proposal. You have 30 seconds to order your ships to withdraw before we demonstrate why the coalition feared human technology during the war." Thyssara felt anger surge through her. "Captain, you are facing over 2,000 ships. Your vessel cannot possibly survive against those odds." 20 seconds, Ben replied calmly. On dozens of coalition ships, alien crew members were starting to feel the first stirrings of doubt. Many of them had heard stories about human military capabilities from older relatives who had fought in the war. The humans had been outnumbered from the beginning of that conflict, but they had still managed to fight the coalition to a standstill. 10 seconds, Ben announced. Thyssara realized that the human captain was not bluffing. Whatever technology his ship possessed, he genuinely believed it could challenge her entire fleet. The confidence in his voice was the same tone she had heard in recordings of human commanders from the war, right before they achieved impossible victories. "Time's up," Ben said quietly. "Amy, fire quantum displacement cannon number 1. The USS Titan's experimental weapon charged for exactly 2 seconds before releasing a pulse of energy that looked like a small blue star. The pulse traveled toward 3 coalition dreadnoughts that were positioned at the front of the enemy formation. What happened next defied everything the aliens thought they knew about physics and warfare. The 3 massive ships simply ceased to exist. They did not explode or break apart. They did not leave wreckage or debris. One moment they were there, and the next moment, there was only empty space where they had been. On the bridge of the Dominion, Thyssara stared at her tactical display in complete shock. 3 of her most powerful ships had just vanished as if they had never existed. Her sensors could not explain what had happened or how to defend against it. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," she ordered, but her voice was shaking with fear. The effect on the coalition fleet was immediate and devastating. Ship captains who had been confident in their superior numbers suddenly realized they were facing technology they could not understand or counter. Panic began to spread through the formation as vessels broke rank and tried to move away from the Human Supercarrier. Amy, launch all fighters, Ben ordered, and fire cannon number 2. The second quantum pulse eliminated 4 more coalition ships, and now the alien fleet was in full retreat. Hundreds of vessels were turning away from the Titan and accelerating toward the edge of the system. The largest military force in galactic history was fleeing from a single human ship. But Ben was not finished demonstrating human capabilities. As coalition fighters tried to attack his vessel, the Titan's own fighter squadrons launched from their bays. The human pilots, led by Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez and pilot Ellen Wright, immediately showed why Earth Federation fighters had been feared throughout the galaxy. The engagement was brutally one-sided. Human fighters moved with precision and coordination that the coalition pilots could not match. Advanced targeting systems allowed them to destroy enemy craft with single shots, while their superior speed and maneuverability made them nearly impossible to hit. Within 10 minutes, over 300 coalition fighters had been destroyed. While the humans had not lost a single pilot, Dr. Paul Warren was monitoring coalition communication networks when the news of the battle reached him. The reports were confused and contradictory, but the basic facts were clear. A single human ship had routed the largest fleet in galactic history. Paul immediately began broadcasting the news to human resistance groups across coalition space. "The Eagle has spread its wings," he transmitted. "The storm has broken the enemy's strength. Rise up, children of Earth, for the galaxy remembers our power." The effect was immediate and overwhelming. On 73 worlds, human populations rose up simultaneously in coordinated action that the coalition could not possibly suppress. Colonial governments fell within hours as human workers, farmers, and administrators remembered that they were citizens of Earth, not servants of alien masters. On New Geneva, Steve Parker declared the restoration of Earth Federation authority and called for volunteers to join the new military. On Vex Prime, Overseer Grixtal abandoned his post and fled the planet rather than face organized human resistance. On Haven, Colonel Rex Williams accepted the surrender of coalition forces and established a provisional Earth Federation government. Fleet Admiral Thusara managed to rally about half of her surviving ships for a second attempt to engage the Titan, but her heart was no longer in the fight. The human ship had demonstrated capabilities that made victory impossible, and now her own crew was beginning to question whether they should continue fighting. "Admiral," reported her communications officer, "we're receiving surrender requests from 17 of our own ships. The crews are refusing to engage the human vessel again." Thusara felt the last of her confidence drain away. If her own people would not fight, then the battle was already over. Captain Ben Carter received reports from across coalition space as human populations took control of their worlds. The uprising he had hoped for was happening faster and more completely than anyone had dared to dream. "Captain," said Commander Amy Foster, "we're receiving a transmission from Earth. Fleet Admiral Jennifer Davis of the Earth Federation Navy reports that 12 additional supercarriers are en route to our position." Ben smiled for the first time since awakening from stasis. Earth had not been idle during the 50 years of isolation. While the coalition had grown comfortable ruling the galaxy, humanity had been preparing for this moment. "Amy, open a channel to all human populations in coalition space," Ben ordered. When the channel was established, Ben's voice reached millions of humans across dozens of worlds. "People of Earth's scattered children, this is Captain Ben Carter of the USS Titan. Your long exile is over. The Earth Federation Navy is returning to bring you home." On Coalition Command Station Alpha, Admiral Lisa Hayes was packing her belongings when High Commander Zextoth arrived at her quarters. The alien leader looked older than his years, his scales gray with exhaustion and defeat. "Admiral Hayes," Zextoth said quietly, "I know what you have done. You sent military intelligence to the human ship." Lisa stood straight and faced her former commander without shame. "Yes, sir, I did. I chose to help my own people instead of those who conquered them." Zextoth nodded slowly. "I cannot say I blame you. If I were in your position, I would probably have done the same thing." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "The Coalition Council is meeting to discuss surrender terms." Would you be willing to represent human interests in those negotiations? Lisa felt tears forming in her eyes. After 50 years of serving her people's conquerors, she was finally being asked to serve her people again. The war was over almost, before it had truly begun. Within a week of the USS Titan's return, human populations controlled 67 worlds, and more coalition forces were surrendering every day. The psychological impact of watching their greatest fleet flee from a single human ship. The Coalition Supreme Council had not held an emergency session like this since the end of the Great War 50 years ago. Representatives from 12 alien species sat in their designated areas of the massive chamber, but the usual diplomatic politeness was nowhere to be found. Fear and uncertainty filled the air like a thick fog. High Commander Zextoth stood at the center of the chamber, his green scales pale with worry. Around him, holographic displays showed reports coming in from across Coalition space. Human populations were becoming restless on dozens of worlds, and some were beginning to openly defy their alien overseers. "The situation is deteriorating rapidly," announced Intelligence Director Mordun, his insectoid form clicking nervously as he spoke. "We have confirmed uprisings on 12 worlds, with more expected. Human workers are abandoning their posts, and some are actively sabotaging Coalition operations." Council member Thisara spread her wings in agitation. "This is ridiculous. One old ship appears and suddenly we're facing a galaxy-wide crisis. We should send the entire fleet and destroy this human vessel before the situation gets worse." But Admiral Hayes, sitting in the Human Advisory section, shook her head. "Council member Thisara, with respect, you don't understand what we're dealing with. The USS Titan is not just a ship. It's a symbol of everything humans fought for during the war. Destroying it would only make things worse." Zextoth looked at the tactical displays showing Coalition fleet positions. "Admiral Hayes is correct. However, we cannot allow this situation to continue. I am ordering Fleet Admiral Thisara to assemble the largest battle group in Coalition history. Every available ship will converge on the human vessel's position." The order went out within minutes, and across Coalition space, military commanders began moving their fleets toward the edge of human territory. Over 2,000 ships would eventually gather, representing the largest show of force in Coalition history. But even as the massive fleet assembled, disturbing reports continued to arrive. On the mining world of Vex Prime, human workers had taken control of 3 major facilities. Overseer Grixtal had been forced to retreat to the administrative complex with his remaining security forces. "The humans are not acting like rebels," Grixtal reported to his superiors. "They are acting like soldiers. They have organized themselves into military units and are using tactics I don't understand. It's as if they remember how to fight." Similar reports came from other worlds. On New Geneva, Steve Parker had declared an independent human government and was calling for volunteers to join a new Earth Federation military. Coalition forces on the planet found themselves outnumbered and surrounded by increasingly confident human colonists. Aboard the USS Titan, Captain Ben Carter was meeting with his senior officers to discuss their next move. The ship's sensors were detecting the massive Coalition fleet that was assembling to face them, but Ben seemed strangely calm about the approaching threat. "Captain," said Commander Amy Foster, "our long-range scanners show over 1,500 Coalition ships moving toward our position, with more arriving every hour. Even with our advanced weapons, those are not good odds." Ben nodded thoughtfully. "Amy, during the war we learned something important about fighting the Coalition. They rely on superior numbers and coordinated tactics, but they don't adapt well when faced with something unexpected." Chief Engineer Kate Sullivan looked up from her technical displays. "The quantum torpedo systems are now operating at full capacity. We have manufacturing capability for about 50 torpedoes per hour, assuming we can get the materials we need." "What about the experimental weapons?" Ben asked. "The ones we were testing when we got caught in the temporal field." Kate's expression grew serious. "The quantum displacement cannons are functional, but they're completely untested in real combat. The theory says they can create localized space-time distortions that make target ships simply cease to exist in this dimension." Dr. Paul Warren was no longer hiding his activities on Vex Prime. Using his access to coalition communication systems, he had established contact with human resistance groups on 47 different worlds. His messages were now being broadcast, openly, calling for coordinated action against coalition forces. "People of Earth's children," Paul transmitted, "the star that was lost has returned to guide us home. Rise up, not in anger, but in the knowledge that we are no longer alone. The galaxy will remember that humanity does not bow to tyrants." The effect was immediate and dramatic. On world after world, human populations began taking action. Most were not violent uprisings, but rather coordinated strikes, work stoppages, and peaceful demonstrations. However, the psychological effect on coalition forces was devastating. Colonel Rex Williams had been a child when the war ended, but his parents had been Earth Federation soldiers. On the agricultural world of Haven, he organized 2,000 human colonists into disciplined units that quickly took control of the planet's government center. "We're not trying to hurt anyone," Rex told the coalition administrator who was negotiating the transfer of power. "We just want to govern ourselves again. 50 years of occupation is enough." The coalition administrator, a nervous Zephyrian named Clickstar, had no idea how to handle the situation. His security force consisted of only 50 soldiers, and they were facing a human population that suddenly remembered how to organize and fight. Fleet Admiral Thisara stood on the bridge of her flagship, the massive battlecruiser Dominion, watching as ship after ship joined her growing armada. Never in coalition history had so many vessels been assembled in one place. The fleet now numbered over 2,000 ships, including the coalition's most powerful dreadnoughts and battle stations. But despite commanding the largest military force in galactic history, Thisara felt deeply worried. The classified files she had been reading contained disturbing information about human military capabilities. During the war, humans had consistently achieved impossible victories through innovative tactics and refusal to accept defeat. "Admiral," reported her intelligence officer, "we're receiving reports that human populations are rising up on 73 worlds now. Some coalition garrisons are requesting permission to withdraw rather than face organized human resistance." Thisara felt her confidence cracking. How could one ship cause such widespread panic among coalition forces? The answer, she realized, was that the ship itself was not the real threat. The real threat was the hope it represented to billions of humans across the galaxy. Aboard the Titan, Commander Amy Foster was reviewing intelligence reports about the massive coalition fleet approaching their position. The numbers were staggering, but Amy had fought against worse odds during the war and lived to tell about it. "Captain," she reported, "the coalition fleet will reach us in approximately 18 hours. They're bringing everything they have, including experimental weapons platforms and ships we've never seen before." Ben Carter looked at the tactical display showing the approaching enemy force. Any rational military commander would have ordered a retreat. But Ben was not thinking like a normal commander, he was thinking like a human. "Amy, send a message to Dr. Warren and the other resistance leaders. Tell them to be ready for something spectacular. We're going to remind the galaxy why humans were feared during the war." The message went out through secure quantum channels, reaching human resistance groups across coalition space. The words were simple, but carried enormous impact. "Get ready. The storm is coming." On Earth, in the Sol system that had been preparing for this moment for 50 years, other ships were beginning their own journeys into space. The USS Titan had been the first to return, but it would not be the last. Humanity was coming home, and they were bringing everything they had learned during 50 years of preparation. Admiral Lisa Hayes sat in her quarters on Coalition Command Station Alpha, staring at a picture of her family who had died during the war. For 50 years she had served the Coalition, telling herself it was the best way to help surviving humans. But now, facing the choice between loyalty to her oppressors and loyalty to her own people, the decision was clear. She opened her computer and began typing a message that would change everything. It was addressed to Captain Ben Carter, and it contained every classified detail about Coalition fleet positions, weapons capabilities, and tactical plans. The message ended with a simple statement: for Earth and for all the humans who never stopped believing. The news traveled faster than anyone expected. Within hours of the first contact with the USS Titan, word was spreading through Coalition space like wildfire. On the industrial world of Vex Prime, human workers in the mining colonies began whispering to each other during their shifts. Overseer Grixtal noticed the change immediately. The large Kethtar had been in charge of human workers for 20 years and knew how to read their moods. Normally, the humans kept their heads down and worked quietly, but today something was different. They were standing straighter, looking each other in the eyes, and worst of all, they were smiling. "You, human worker," Grixtal called to a man, operating a mining laser. "Why are you not focused on your work?" The human, a middle-aged man named Tony Baker, looked up at the alien overseer with an expression Grixtal had never seen before. It was not fear or submission. It was something that made the Kethtar's scales prickle with worry. "Just thinking about home, sir," Tony replied, and went back to his work. But Grixtal noticed that Tony was humming quietly to himself, and other human workers were starting to hum the same tune. It was an old Earth song that the aliens had tried to ban years ago. Similar scenes were playing out across dozens of Coalition worlds. On the farming planet of New Geneva, human colonist leader Steve Parker was holding secret meetings in abandoned buildings. Steve had been born after the war and had never seen human military power, but he had heard the stories from older colonists. "Is it true?" asked Maria Santos, a young woman who worked in the food processing plants. "Is there really a human warship that survived the war?" Steve nodded slowly. "The reports are coming in from multiple sources. Something big is happening out there, and the Coalition is scared. I haven't seen alien security forces this nervous since the revolt on Kepler 7. Meanwhile, Coalition Fleet Admiral Thisara was reviewing classified military files in her command center aboard the massive battle station Dominion. As the Coalition's top military commander, she had access to records that most people never saw. What she was reading made her mandibles click nervously. The files contained detailed reports from the Great War, including battle analyses that had been classified for 50 years. Human tactical innovations had consistently surprised Coalition forces. Humans had developed new weapons and strategies faster than any other species in known history. Most disturbing of all, humans had shown an ability to turn defeats into victories through sheer determination and creative thinking. "Computer, show me the tactical analysis of the USS Titan from the Battle of Kepler Station," Thisara commanded. The holographic display filled with images of a massive human ship surrounded by Coalition vessels. According to the records, the Titan had been outnumbered 50-1 in that final battle, but had still managed to destroy over half the Coalition fleet before disappearing. "Estimated capabilities of human supercarrier," the computer reported in its neutral voice. "Quantum torpedo systems capable of penetrating any known shield technology. Advanced fighter squadrons with kill ratios of 20-1 against Coalition craft. Experimental weapon systems with unknown potential." Thisara felt her confidence wavering. She commanded the largest battle fleet in Coalition history, but these reports suggested that human technology might have advanced far beyond anything they currently possessed. On the frontier world of Kepler 7, human resistance leader Carl Johnson was organizing the first open defiance of Coalition rule in decades. Carl had been a child during the war, but his father had been a soldier in the Earth Federation military. The stories of human courage and ingenuity had been passed down through generations of colonists. Listen carefully. Carl told a gathering of 200 humans in a hidden cavern. "We've waited 50 years for this moment. A human ship has returned, and that means Earth has not forgotten us. It's time to show the aliens that humanity is not broken." The Coalition garrison on Kepler 7 consisted of only 200 alien soldiers. They had been enough to keep the human population under control for decades, but now they faced the possibility of a planet-wide uprising. Garrison Commander Vector had already sent desperate messages to Fleet Command requesting reinforcements. Dr. Paul Warren was working frantically in his laboratory, using his access to Coalition communication networks to spread the word to human communities across the galaxy. His coded messages were being relayed from world to world, carrying hope to millions of humans who had never dared to dream of freedom. "The star rises in the east," Paul transmitted, using old resistance codes from the war. "The eagle returns to the nest." To alien listeners, these sounded like meaningless phrases, but to humans who remembered the old days, they meant that Earth's greatest ship had come home. Aboard the USS Titan, Chief Engineer Kate Sullivan was working with a team of technicians to bring all ship systems online. The massive supercarrier had been designed to fight entire fleets, but 50 years of hibernation had taken its toll on some systems. "Captain, we have a problem," Kate reported to Ben Carter over the ship's communication system. "The quantum torpedo manufacturing systems are running at only 60% capacity. We can build new weapons, but not as fast as we used to." Ben nodded grimly. "How many quantum torpedoes do we currently have in storage?" 847, Kate replied. "In a full-scale battle, that might last us 30 minutes against a large fleet." It was not enough, Ben knew, but it would have to do. The important thing was not how many weapons they had, but how they used them. During the war, humans had learned to make every shot count and every tactic unexpected. Commander Amy Foster was in the fighter bay, watching as pilots emerged from stasis and began checking their spacecraft. The fighters were small but fast, equipped with quantum pulse weapons that could punch through alien shields. More importantly, they were flown by humans who understood that losing was not an option. "How are the pilots adapting?" Ben asked as he joined Amy in the observation deck. "Better than expected," Amy replied. "Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez has already run 3 simulation missions and achieved perfect scores. Pilot Ellen Wright says the IDOM new targeting systems are even more accurate than what we had during the war." Ben felt a surge of pride watching his people prepare for battle. These men and women had volunteered for an experimental mission 50 years ago, knowing they might never see home again. Now they were humanity's only hope for freedom. Back on Coalition Command Station Alpha, Admiral Lisa Hayes was struggling with the most difficult decision of her life. High Commander Zextoth was demanding that she convince the humans to surrender, but every instinct told her that Captain Carter would never give up. Worse, Lisa found herself hoping that he would not surrender. For 50 years, she had served the Coalition faithfully, telling herself it was the only way to help her people. But seeing the USS Titan had awakened feelings she thought were long dead. The dream of human independence was calling to her again. "Admiral," said her aide, a young human named Peter Clark, "there are reports coming in from human colonies across the sector. It seems word about the ship has spread, and people are getting restless." Lisa nodded sadly. "I expected as much. Hope is a powerful force, and humans have been without it for too long." What Lisa did not tell her aide was that she had already made her decision. When the time came to choose between the Coalition and her own people, she knew which side she would be on. The question was whether she would have the courage to act when the moment arrived. On distant Earth, in the Sol system that had been isolated from the galaxy for 50 years, other ships were preparing to follow the Titan's path. The return of their greatest vessel was just the beginning of humanity's plan to reclaim their place among the stars. Admiral Lisa Hayes stood before the Coalition Council, feeling the weight of dozens of alien eyes upon her. The council chamber was a massive circular room with representatives from 12 different species. At the center sat High Commander Zextoth, his green scales darker than usual with worry. "Admiral Hayes," Zextoth began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who ruled half the galaxy. "You are our expert on human military capabilities. Tell us what we are facing." Lisa took a deep breath. "If this truly is the USS Titan, then we are looking at the most advanced warship ever built by humanity. During the war, it was their flagship and the symbol of human resistance. The ship was designed to fight entire fleets and win." The council chamber erupted in worried whispers. Many of the younger alien officials had never fought humans and did not understand what made them dangerous. But the older members remembered the fear they had felt during the war years. "Surely one ship cannot threaten our entire military," said Council Member Thisura, a proud Zephyrian whose wings buzzed with nervous energy. "We have thousands of vessels and control hundreds of worlds." Zextoth looked at her with tired eyes. "You did not fight in the war, Thisura. Humans do not think like other species. They do not surrender when outnumbered. They do not retreat when facing certain death. One human ship destroyed entire coalition battle groups during the war." Meanwhile, aboard the USS Titan, Captain Ben, Carter was slowly waking up from 50 years of stasis sleep. The medical bay was filled with soft blue light, as automated systems checked his vital signs and brought his body back to full function. As his mind cleared, memories of the final battle came flooding back. "Welcome back, Captain," said a calm female voice. It was Phoenix, the ship's artificial intelligence. "I apologize for the long sleep, but it was necessary for survival." Ben sat up on the medical table, his muscles weak from the long hibernation. "Phoenix, give me a status report. How long were we out and where are we?" "We have been in temporal suspension for 50 years, 2 months, and 16 days, Phoenix replied. "We are currently approaching the edge of what used to be human space. I regret to inform you that the political situation has changed significantly during our absence." As Phoenix explained what had happened during their time away, Ben felt anger building in his chest. The coalition had taken control of human colonies and turned humanity into a servant race. The proud Earth Federation that he had fought to defend no longer existed. "How many crew members survived the stasis?" Ben asked, already dreading the answer. 47,312 out of 50,000, Phoenix reported. The casualties were within acceptable parameters for such an extended hibernation period. Ben closed his eyes and said a silent prayer for the nearly 3,000 crew members who had died in their sleep. They had volunteered for an experimental mission and paid the ultimate price. Now it was up to the survivors to finish what they had started. Commander Amy Foster was already awake and working in the tactical center when Ben arrived on the bridge. She had been his second in command before the temporal event, and he was relieved to see her sharp mind was still focused on their mission. "Captain, I've been reviewing our weapon status," Amy reported. "All quantum torpedo systems are operational, and our experimental shield generators are functioning at 98% capacity. The temporal field generators that got us into this mess might actually give us a significant tactical advantage." Ben nodded as he looked at the main screen showing coalition patrol ships in the distance. "What about our fighter squadrons?" 240 fighters are ready for launch," Amy said. "Pilots are coming out of stasis now and should be ready for combat operations within 6 hours." The bridge was slowly filling with crew members as more people emerged from hibernation. Chief Engineer Kate Sullivan arrived from the engine room, with a grim expression on her face. "Captain, the quantum drive is stable, but I wouldn't recommend any more time jumps without major repairs," Kate reported. "We used up most of our temporal energy getting out of that battle 50 years ago. We might get one more jump if we really need it, but after that, we're stuck in normal space." Ben understood the implications. If they got into serious trouble, they could not escape the same way they had before. This time they would have to fight their way out or die trying. Back on Coalition Command Station Alpha, Admiral Hayes was preparing for the most important mission of her career. "Hi, Commander." Zextoth had agreed to let her make contact with the human ship, but only under strict conditions. She would take a small diplomatic vessel and try to convince the humans to surrender peacefully. "Remember, Admiral," Zextoth had told her, "these humans have been isolated for 50 years. They may not understand how completely their people have been defeated. Make them see that resistance is hopeless." But as Lisa prepared her ship for departure, she wondered if the coalition leaders understood what they were really facing. During the war, humans had never surrendered, even when facing impossible odds. What made anyone think they would start now? Dr. Paul Warren was working in his laboratory on the industrial world of Vex Prime when the news reached him. As one of the few human scientists allowed to work on advanced projects, Paul had access to coalition communication networks. When he heard about the mysterious ship from human space, his heart began to race with hope. Paul had been a young engineer during the war, working on secret weapons projects for the Earth Federation. When the war ended, the Coalition had forced him to work on their technology instead. For 50 years he had dreamed of the day when humanity would rise again. Carefully, Paul began sending coded messages to other humans on Vex Prime. The messages were disguised as routine work reports, but they carried news that would spread like fire through the human population. A human ship had returned, and it was bigger and more powerful than anything the Coalition possessed. On the bridge of the USS Titan, Ben was reviewing tactical data when the communication system detected an incoming transmission. The message was coming from a Coalition diplomatic vessel requesting permission to come aboard and negotiate. "It's Admiral Hayes," Amy reported after running the name through their database. She was a lieutenant on the destroyer Braveheart during the war. Her record shows she was captured when her ship was destroyed and has been working for the Coalition ever since. Ben felt a mixture of anger and sadness. Another human forced to serve their former enemies just to survive. "Open a channel," he ordered. Admiral Hayes appeared on the main screen, looking older but still recognizable from her service record. "Captain Carter, I represent the Coalition Council. They have asked me to discuss terms for your peaceful surrender." Ben looked at her for a long moment before responding. "Admiral Hayes, with respect to your service during the war, you can tell the Coalition Council that humanity does not surrender. We did not surrender 50 years ago when we were outnumbered 1,000 to 1, and we will not surrender now." The bridge crew nodded in agreement, their faces showing the same determination that had made humans legendary during the war. They had returned from the past to find their people enslaved, but they were not going to let that continue. "Captain," Hayes said quietly, "you don't understand how much has changed. Humanity has been scattered across the galaxy. We have no unified government, no military, no hope of resistance. One ship cannot change that." Ben smiled grimly. "Admiral, you're wrong about one thing. This is not just one ship. This is the beginning of humanity's return to the stars." Captain Jake Morrison stared at his console screen in disbelief. The sensors on his Coalition patrol ship Nexus were showing something impossible. A massive energy signature had just appeared at the edge of the dead zone, the abandoned sector, where humans used to live before the war ended 50 years ago. Jake rubbed his tired eyes and looked again. The reading was still there. Something huge was coming through space, bigger than any ship the Coalition had ever built. He called his communications officer over to double-check the equipment. "Sir, the sensors are working fine," said Lieutenant Rex, a young Kethtar with green scales and yellow eyes. "Whatever that thing is, it's real and it's moving toward us." Jake felt a cold feeling in his stomach. He had heard stories from his grandfather about the human warships. The old Kethtar had fought in the Great War and always spoke with fear about human technology. Most people thought the stories were just tales to scare children, but now Jake was not so sure. The ship's computer made a soft beeping sound. New data was coming in from the long-range scanners. Jake's hands shook as he read the information. The ship was over 3 miles long and 1 mile wide. Its hull was made of some kind of metal that their scanners could barely read through. Most shocking of all, the energy output was 10 times higher than their biggest battlecruiser. "Get me Admiral Hayes on the emergency channel," Jake ordered. His voice was trying to stay calm, but everyone on the bridge could hear the worry. "Admiral." Lisa Hayes was having a quiet morning on Coalition Command Station Alpha when the call came in. She was one of the few humans who held a high rank in the Coalition military. Most humans after the war had been given simple jobs or sent to farming colonies. Lisa had proven herself useful to the alien leaders, and they kept her around to help control other humans. When Jake's face appeared on her screen, she could see he was scared. That worried her because Jake was known for being brave and calm in dangerous situations. "Admiral, we have a problem," Jake began. "There's a ship coming, out of the dead zone. The computer says it matches the design of a human supercarrier from the war." Lisa felt her heart stop. She had been a young officer during the Great War, serving on a small destroyer. She remembered the stories about the human supercarriers, especially one called the USS Titan. That ship had been humanity's pride and the Coalition's greatest fear. Everyone said it had been destroyed in the final battle at Kepler Station. "Send me all the data," Lisa ordered. And Jake, keep your distance. Do not try to make contact until I give you permission. The data arrived on Lisa's computer within minutes. As she read through the sensor reports, her face grew pale. The energy readings were exactly like the old human ships from the war, but much stronger. If this really was a human supercarrier, it was more advanced than anything they had faced before. Lisa's hands moved quickly across her control panel, sending an emergency message to the Coalition Council. Within an hour, the most powerful alien leaders in the galaxy would know that humanity might have returned. High Commander Zextoth was in the middle of a military planning meeting when the message arrived. The large Kethtar leader had been born during the war and remembered the fear his people felt when fighting humans. Humans were small and weak compared to most alien races, but they were clever and refused to give up even when facing impossible odds. This cannot be true, Zextoth said to his advisors. All human military ships were destroyed or captured. We made sure of that. But even as he spoke, Zextoth felt doubt growing in his mind. During the war, humans had shown an ability to build amazing technology very quickly. They had gone from simple space travel to advanced warships in just a few decades. If some humans had survived in secret, who knew what they might have built? Intelligence Director Mordun, a tall insectoid Zephyrian, clicked his mandibles nervously. Sir, our records show that the USS Titan disappeared during the final battle. We never found wreckage or confirmed its destruction. We assumed it had been destroyed because human resistance collapsed after that battle. Zextoth felt a chill run down his spine. The Coalition had won the war not through superior fighting, but because human morale had broken when their greatest ship vanished. If the Titan had survived and was now returning, what did that mean for the Coalition's control over the galaxy? Back on the Nexus, Jake watched his screens as the massive ship continued to approach. It was still too far away to see clearly, but the computer was starting to identify details. The hull showed signs of damage from some great battle, with scorch marks and holes that had been repaired with patches of different metal. This ship had clearly seen hard fighting. Sir, called out his sensor operator, I'm picking up smaller ships launching from the big one. Looks like fighter craft, but they're unlike anything in our database. Jake felt sweat forming on his forehead. Fighter craft meant this was definitely a military vessel, and if it was launching fighters, it might be preparing for battle. He ordered his crew to charge their weapons and raise shields, but he knew that if this really was a human supercarrier, his small patrol ship would not last long in a fight. The communication system suddenly came to life with a crackling sound. A voice spoke in the old human language that most aliens had forgotten. Jake's computer worked to translate the words, but the meaning was clear enough. Someone was trying to make contact. Admiral Hayes received Jake's report about the incoming transmission just as the Coalition Council was gathering for an emergency meeting. The most powerful beings in the galaxy were coming together to discuss what might be the return of their greatest enemy. As Lisa walked toward the council chambers, she thought about the humans living on colonies throughout Coalition space. For 50 years they had been told that resistance was hopeless, that humanity had been defeated forever. What would happen when word spread that a human warship had returned? Would they rise up again? Would the galaxy burn in another war? The massive doors to the council chamber opened, and Lisa saw the worried faces of the alien leaders. High Commander Zextoth looked older than his years, and even the usually calm Zephyrian representatives seemed nervous. Everyone knew that the return of human military power could change everything. Outside in space, the USS Titan continued its slow approach toward Coalition territory. Inside its massive hull, systems that had been sleeping for 50 years were coming back to life. Soon the galaxy would remember why humans had been both feared and respected throughout the stars.